Alright, so of course the most trending name right now in terms of trade talks and rumors in the NBA has got to be Ben Simmons, especially after that abysmal performance of his in the second round playoff series against the Hawks, in which the Sixers lost in 7 games, losing Game 7 on their own home court. Now, I'm not going to blame all that on Ben Simmons because I think there are a number of factors that led to their defeat, but Simmons was a big part of that, especially in Game 7 when he ultimately became a liability on offense with his inability to shoot the basketball and even driving to the basket, which is actually one of Ben's things that he does well on offense because he was just too timid in getting fouled and getting sent to the line because he was shooting near 30% from the line in that series, which is just unacceptable. But all of that being said, Ben Simmons is still a 3-time All-Star, a 2-time All-Defensive first-team player, and an All-NBA player. He's an elite defender and playmaker, and if you're a Bulls fan, well, that's something you can't just brush off and claim that he's trash because that's what the media has been saying about him, not when his skill set fits exactly what this Bulls team needs. Now, I made a video the night the Sixers were eliminated on whether or not the Bulls should pursue a trade for Ben Simmons, really because his value is at an all-time low. And in that video, I explained all of the positives and negatives for trading for someone like Simmons. So I won't go into that into detail in this video, but rather hit on some salient upsides and downsides. And then in this video, I want to talk about 5 trades for Ben Simmons that I would be okay with for the Bulls. So what's going on, everyone? You are listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, before I get into these trades, I know there are going to be a lot of people with charged comments on this topic because you have a lot of Bulls fans who absolutely want nothing to do with Ben Simmons, and then you have others who are all about bringing him in for the right trade. And I'm sure there will be a handful of Sixers fans who will come in here and say, I'm dreaming or delusional if a trade for Ben Simmons doesn't include a package with Zach Lavine in it. Well, sorry to break it to you, Sixers fans, but your all-star player's value is the lowest it could possibly be right now. So I would turn it around and say you're delusional if you think you could get something even remotely close to the level of player Lavine is after Simmons' disappointing postseason. So if you want to save yourself some time and go on to the next video, that is completely fine, but none of these trade proposals include Zach Lavine because I don't want Ben Simmons if it means that we have to give up Lavine as a result. Really, the only way Simmons makes sense on the Bulls is if you keep Lavine, because Simmons, again, needs to be surrounded by shooters and in a role where he isn't expected to take on a big portion of scoring and solely focus on defense and running the flow of offense, which is what he excels at. And also, spoiler, none of these trade scenarios include Patrick Williams or Nikola Vucevic, because again, in my view, if you're going to trade for Ben Simmons and take on his massive contract and all the risks that come with it, you shouldn't be willing to give up, in my view, your 3 untouchable players. So I know most people will say, okay, well then you're not going to get Ben Simmons, and that's fine, that we don't want him. It's not worth taking on that risk, giving up those kind of assets. So I just want to throw that out as a caveat, since I know a lot of people are going to view these trades as unreasonable, and yeah, they probably are, but you're not going to overpay for Simmons after what we just saw. It's like a stock. When a stock is down, you're not going to pay more than its value, but if you buy low in the hopes that it can turn around, taking on less risk, then you go for it. Now, reportedly, the Pacers did offer a trade for Malcolm Brogdon and a first-round pick for Ben Simmons, and the Sixers turned that down, which is kind of surprising. I mean, if I'm the Sixers, I would probably take that deal because it's actually decent value for Simmons given everything that just happened. So yes, I am aware of this, but with all that being said, in this first trade scenario, and I'll admit this one is probably the biggest stretch of them all, and I wouldn't blame the Sixers if they simply laughed at this trade, but this would be a sign and trade for Lauri Markkanen and Thaddeus Young for Ben Simmons. Now, in this trade machine, they estimate Markkanen's cap hold at $20.1 million, which is why the money actually works in this scenario despite Simmons' large contract. Now, I'll add each of these trade scenarios that I'm about to show all include Markkanen because I actually think Markkanen makes sense on the Sixers. After what we just saw in that series against the Hawks, when what the Sixers lack is shooting more than anything. They've got an incredible big man, one of the best players in the entire league, and although he can shoot decently well for a big man, he's not known for his outside shot. Markkanen on the Sixers actually enables them to stretch the floor, but also gives them the rebounding that they would otherwise lose with Ben Simmons. This also gives them a cheaper contract for Lauri than the amount that they would have locked in with Simmons, and it also includes Thaddeus Young, who is a solid, versatile big man that can give them playmaking, defense, and scoring. And he's on an expiring deal, which frees up more cap space for them the following season without being locked into Simmons' deal. Now, realistically speaking, The Sixers aren't going to like that deal despite the reasons I just mentioned, because it isn't enough for someone like Simmons. So in this next trade, I've also included Coby White. And as much as I don't want to give up on Coby White because it's way too early in his career to do that, the fact of the matter is he's one of the few players on this Bulls roster outside of the three untouchables that actually has some value in a trade. So by adding Coby White, this gives the Sixers a young point guard who can also shoot. Again, the Sixers are in need of better shooters. Coby has also shown the ability to run an offense and be an okay playmaker, albeit nothing to the level of Ben Simmons. And again, Coby is on a cheap rookie contract, saving them money on their books, giving them more flexibility by offloading Simmons' contract. Now, if that package wasn't enough, well, then I would still be okay if we included Troy Brown Jr. into the mix, a young, scrappy small forward who is great on defense, great athleticism with upside potential on offense as well. I mean, you look at all of these guys, and it is a lot to give up for Ben Simmons, but I do still think that it would be worth it because you're adding Simmons to a team that includes Lavine and Vucevic and Patrick Williams. And then as for this next trade, I've tweaked this one slightly, but rather than including Thaddeus Young in this deal, we're putting in Tomas Satoransky, another backup point guard and a ball handler who, in my opinion, is actually better, for now anyway, a ball handler than Coby White is when it comes to facilitating and running an offense, which, again, if you're the Sixers, you're going to need when you lose someone like Ben Simmons. And then finally, the last trade, we're going to include all of the previous players that were mentioned together in a 5-player haul, but this time the Sixers would not only send Ben Simmons, but also Seth Curry. And I know most Bulls fans, the hesitancy around Simmons is that it takes away our shooting, especially if we're talking about including guys like Coby White and Markkanen in a trade. Well, by bringing in Seth Curry, who is an above average shooter, he's a little older, so again, he fits the Bulls timeline, while the Sixers get younger shooters in Coby White and Lauri Markkanen. Seth Curry is also on a very, very favorable contract as well. Now, in all of these trade scenarios that I only discussed the benefits of what the Sixers would get in these trade deals. And that's because for the Bulls, I've explained it before ad nauseum, but the thing that this Bulls roster needs the most to complement Zach Lavine and Nikola Vucevic, who are both great players on offense and high volume scorers, is someone who can play defense at a high level and be a true floor general, someone who is going to get those guys the best looks on every possession, and Ben Simmons is that guy who can do that for you. I know he has his flaws, and they're pretty big flaws. Like, what star NBA player absolutely refuses to shoot the basketball, or a star basketball player who shoots free throws so poorly? Like, that is a legitimate concern, and especially when he's set to make over $40 million, or close to it anyway, in 2025. You're taking on a huge risk of it not working out by trading for him. But again, that's why you don't sell the farm in order to get him. I mean, in all of these trade proposals, the Bulls aren't giving up that much in exchange for him. You're talking about guys who are on expiring contracts, partial guarantees, a restricted free agent who you might end up losing for nothing anyway. So in my view, these are all steals of a trade for what you're getting in return. And yes, I'm fully aware that the Sixers likely wouldn't even entertain any of these offers, but hey, the Bulls should only be willing to give up so much for a guy whose trade value is at an all-time low. And if they want to reject these and say it's not enough or close to enough, well, that's fine. We'll pass, and then we'll just try to go after Lonzo Ball then. What I will say about Ben Simmons, though, is that he's likely never going to get a jump shot. He's been in the league long enough now to where you would have at least seen some sort of improvement in his shot. And we just haven't seen that. So for me, I'm actually not as concerned about his shooting, especially when you have Lavine and Vucevic. What I am concerned about, though, is his free throw shooting, because that is a problem in late game situations when players resort to hack a Ben and then the coach is forced to take him out of the game in crunch time. Like, that can't happen. So for me, the most important thing I would like to see from Ben Simmons and what he needs to work on this offseason is his free throw shooting. And even if he can at least just get that up to 70%, which is still bad, but better from his 60% career average, then at least he doesn't become as much of a liability in late game situations, and he can still be relied upon for his defensive effort. So yes, I know I'm the minority in my views on Ben Simmons, and I think the Bulls should absolutely pursue a trade for Simmons and take on that risk while his trade value is low. Again, though, as long as it doesn't include trading those 3 untouchable players that I mentioned. And if it takes one of those guys to get a deal done, then it's not worth it and you move on to the next. I want to know what you guys think, though. How do you feel about these trade scenarios that I highlighted? What is the most that you would be willing to give up for Ben Simmons in a trade, keeping in mind that you're locking yourself up into a max contract for the next 4 years? Let me know in the comments, and as always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.